Good afternoon, everybody. Today I'm going to frame a question, and I'm pretty sure it's not a question that you hear in the halls and the offices of people that decide how we're going to educate our children in the United States. The question is, what can educators learn from video game designers? Now, before I answer the question, I'd like to tell you a story. A few years ago, a guy at my company started playing a massively multiplayer online game to kill time while his wife was studying in night school. Now, he didn't do anything crazy, just played regularly a couple hours a night for a couple of months. But he quickly realized that the game would be a lot more fun if we could level up more quickly. So he took a 3-day weekend, went into his room, closed the door, locked it, turned off the phone, and for 3 days, he didn't change clothes, he didn't bathe. He just sat there grinding away, exploring, problem solving, collecting rewards, building skills, learning to function with the people he'd met online in essentially a team-based sport. Hour by hour, day by day, he advanced towards his ultimate goal. And that goal was a blue cape. Now, it was a really cool blue cape. And like the robe they grant people earning advanced degrees at institutions just like this one, this cape signifies great learning and accomplishment. Now, do you know how long it took him to earn that blue cape? How many hours of exploration, mastering complex systems, combat, social interaction, getting deep into the guts of the product? 121 hours. 5 full days of his life. Now, let me put that into perspective. Pimsleur is a company that makes audio cassettes for learning foreign languages. The typical basic program to learn a language from scratch is about 30 hours of audio cassette. If you listen to it, say, 3 times, total of 90 hours, spend another 30 hours practicing with your friends, you get to a sum total of about 120 hours. So let me put that blue cape into perspective. In about the same amount of time, he could have mastered basic Mandarin. Now, it turns out that our guy is not at all alone. Here's a slide coming up, if they catch up for us here, that shows some of the information on what hardcore players are doing in games. This is the top 10% of time invested in some of the bigger franchises. Now, we're still talking about millions of consumers, but look at the data. They're spending hundreds of millions of hours deeply immersed in games. Now, here's a number that are playing just one of those games today, 1.7 million. Now, the next number up is the number of people receiving engineering degrees in the entirety of the United States. 25 times more people are playing that single game than are earning engineering degrees every year in the United States. Now, is that because engineering is hard and the game is easy? Hardly. Now, the game may not be honors calculus, but I can assure you the skill, the tenacity, the collaboration required to get to a level 50 in an MMO is anything but easy. Let me compare each of them just for a second. Carnegie Mellon, this very institution here, estimates that it takes 1,680 hours of classroom time to get a bachelor's degree in computer science and engineering. We estimate that a player that is advancing in that same MMO will spend 1,724 hours in a single year playing the game. Now, why is it that educators can't find that same commitment, interest, frankly, dogged, never end, I'm going to make it happen impact from their consumer when they're trying to educate our children? Well, we've heard the story before. If it was easy, someone would have done it by now. Actually, 2 of my colleagues tried. A couple of guys up in Canada. They founded a company called BioWare. Maybe some of you have heard of it. One of their first games, and I'm going to have to read this, Gastroenterology Patient Simulator. Now, that doesn't roll off the tongue like Counter-Strike or Doom or Grand Theft Auto. Now, and Gastroenterology Patient Simulator was not a big seller. And for some of you that know, common sense prevailed, and these guys went on to take a company that's created some of the more artistic, best-selling, frankly, most compelling entertainment experiences in the history of the gaming industry. But why is it that no one has cracked the code? No one has made a game that educators are willing to use to teach us all math, science, English, engineering? I think the first answer to that question, it's about economics. It frankly just costs more money to build a game than it does to create a textbook. But I think there's something much more important. I believe the biggest barrier to making games into an educational experience is the long-standing bias that educators and administrators have against interactive entertainment. There's a bias against games that's a function of this. Educators, policymakers, administrators are not part of today's generation, your generation. The choices they make are reflective of a different ideology. And frankly, I don't think we can wait for the people in power today to retire for a younger audience of gamers to take over and change the way it works. But for many administrators, it really boils down to this, a simple idea. Games are bad, books are good. Now, there's an author, a guy named Steven Johnson. He wrote a great parody. And he speculated about what would happen, or what would have happened, if video games were created 300 years before books. Now, this is a parody. I'm going to read a little bit to you from the screen. But it's worth taking a look at it. Some interesting insights. Reading books chronically understimulates the senses. Unlike game playing, which engages the child in a vivid, three-dimensional world, books are simply a barren string of words on a page. Books are tragically isolating. While games engage the young in complex social relationships with peers, books sequester the child, shut off from the interaction with others. The most dangerous property of books is that they follow a fixed linear path. They instill a passivity in children, making them feel powerless to change their circumstances. Reading is not an active participatory process, it's a submissive one. Now, while I'm a reader and I'm not going to diss books, I do think there's a point to be made. It's a point that was brought home to me this past winter while I was skiing. I managed to sit on a chairlift next to a young guy about 8 years old. He started talking to me about football. And in that conversation, it became clear that even though I'm a fan of professional football, he knew a lot more than I do. He knew the starting lineup in virtually every team in the NFL. Up through December, he knew the win-loss records, but probably more importantly, he understood more about the strategy for what makes for a winning team than I've ever picked up from conversations with NFL coaches, NCAA coaches. It was frankly fascinating. He learned more than I've ever could have imagined possible. Now, I assumed his dad must be a college or a professional coach, or his dad's a player. And I asked him about it. He said, no, I play the video game. And I was stunned by how much this young man had absorbed. And this is a precise point that I read in a study at University of Oregon recently, where they said that they were trying to study the football intelligence of coaches, players, and video game players. And what they figured out was the video game players actually knew more about the strategy of the game and the facts around the game than the professionals that practice it every day. There's something profound about the way video games can help teach a subject. But what makes them so deeply engaging? What explains the time commitment where people invest so much time solving problems and honing their skills in video games? Why do they learn so naturally from video games when they often find a classroom environment sterile by comparison? Well, I'm not a teacher, but this is a question that I think I'm in a pretty good position to answer. If I get it right, my company makes a profit. If I get it wrong, I get fired. So, first, important point, games are tailored to the individual. There's no professor lecturing to a class of 300 or even 30. With games, you learn at precisely your own speed. You take on a challenge exactly when you're ready for it. You explore and hone skills that map to your greatest interest. You don't have to wait for the person next to you to figure out what the professor's talking about, or get frustrated because it's moving too fast for you to keep up. In a game, each lesson is tailored precisely to your own speed. Second, games are interactive and learning is tested instantly. In games, you don't get a test at the end of the semester. Tests come second by second while you play. Learning and test are meshed together seamlessly. Learn the skill, test it, prove it, advance. Get it right, the blue cape is yours. Come up short, try again. Third, games offer tons of rewards. In almost every game, accomplishments are recognized with a prize: health, ammunition, advancement to the next level. Beat a level, the bells and whistles go off. And if you fail, you respawn, you get to try again. And even the respawn exercise is a fun one. There are no bad grades, no recriminations, no penalty boxes. Just get up and play again. Fourth, games are fundamentally social. Online games in particular reward teamwork and group interaction. You meet friends with similar interests, competitors with similar skills. You quickly become part of a community. You measure your success, learning, and accomplishment in comparison with your friends and the new friends you've made online. And here's a real plus. Some of the best games have co-op modes. So it's me and you against the machine. We win, we lose. The blue cape is ours if we can make it happen. Now, I started by asking a question, why schools really aren't more like video games. And I think you might have thought that was a bit of a joke when I started, but it isn't. I think there's a real opportunity for educators to learn lessons about why games are compelling for young people today. And a couple of people are making some really smart inroads. Now, the first group here, the Khan Academy, has a website. I'm sure you've probably heard of it. They have hundreds of tutorials online on Facebook. Now, they've hosted over 120 million hours of online lessons. Khan is highly engaging, and in the course of a few hours, you can learn a lot about an SAT test or calculus or English or other subjects. I think Khan is onto something great. The lessons proceed at your own pace, and they're starting to use interactivity. But for the lack of the budget, their primary medium is still video. There aren't any fundamentally interactive entertainment style experiences. But what they're doing is important, and trust me, if you haven't gained any familiarity with these guys, go online, take a look. What they're doing is important. It's going to make a difference. Another thing that I'm looking at carefully in watching is what the MacArthur Foundation is doing with the Entertainment Software Association. Together, they've committed $10 million to a 3-year study that hopes to harness the power of what makes interactive entertainment so compelling for subjects like science, literacy, and social studies. They will emphasize skills like systems thinking, persistence, problem solving, and collaboration. Now, my company is hosting this project on our Redwood Shores campus in California. Working with our developers, they will create and pilot curriculum and development packages for teachers based on mini games and extensions of popular video games. The lessons will be distributed for free online through open platforms like Origin, Facebook, Steam. And all of the Innovation Lab work will be available to researchers and educators for no charge. I think it's got a lot of potential to break out. I think this is another one you're going to learn a lot about, and I hope you pay attention to it. There's probably a breakthrough coming here. So I'm not an educator, but I think what makes games so compelling could make learning a lot more fun and successful. Games are tailored to the individual. They're interactive. They allow us to try, fail, and try again and learn from the experience. Games are highly rewarding, and deep down, games are fundamentally social. Personally, I look forward to the day when educators take video games seriously, when they figure out the design elements which engage players and also can engage students in much the same way. What can excite them might be a blue cape, but then again, it might be something a little bit more important, like a diploma. Thank you.